Here at the Center for Media Design, we began exploratory research concerning consumers, specifically college-age consumers, and their concerns about privacy. With all the information that we garnered from this study, we decided to break up our results into 3 different parts. This is the 3rd and final installment of that research, entitled Privacy Unbound: Choice, Clarity, Control. What we found in our first output, the stop and go of data flow, is that first, our consumers varied widely in what they even considered to be personal information. And secondly, that the sharing of those types of information was highly situational. For our participants, sharing their information depended on what they were sharing, with whom, and in what context. In Output 2, Shaping Attitudes Influencing Behaviors, we discussed this seemingly paradoxical situation in terms of 5 key factors that influence our participants' behaviors and attitudes. After our participants voiced their concerns about sharing their personal information and disclosed different factors that influence their attitudes and behaviors around privacy, we asked them to resolve the very issues that they proposed. If they were designing a strategy to address the privacy problem, what would it include? What emerged from our discussion were 6 solutions that our consumers felt addressed those concerns that were most pressing for them. Of course, they admitted that they'd probably continue to use the services even if their solutions weren't enacted, not unlike most of us. But in their minds, companies that implement their solutions could gain a competitive advantage by meeting the consumers halfway. Our participants want to see real choices when it comes to the privacy and security of their personal information. Key to this solution was their ability to grant explicit consent at any given point during the use of a service or software, not in just an all-or-nothing agreement at initiation or installment. Perhaps, as they suggest, the trade-off might be to offer different levels of access for different degrees of information shared. Furthermore, if a software update or a change in terms of use will affect privacy settings, consumers said they wanted to be protected by a default level of security that they've chosen. Regarding terms of agreement and privacy settings, participants often noted purposefully confusing language with no attempt of explaining important legal jargon. They recognized the importance of the legalese, but with an absence of clarification, it is seen as self-serving on the part of the service provider. They'd like to see agreements that are mutually binding, but written in consumer-friendly language.
Whenever a company of any kind is collecting this information, the default setting is that, kind of like what they're doing, is you know exactly what that information is used for, and it will only be used for that purpose. Mm-hmm. And then also that if they want to use it for something else, they cannot do that without your express, clicking a box consent.
They'd like to see agreements formatted in a way that facilitates clear communication. This may include bullet points and summaries of key points alongside the current format.
Before, I mean, there are a whole bunch of words on there that I don't even understand.
Right.
I'm a college student, so
right.
Just get away with get rid of all that stuff and make it just clear, precise, concise, easy, simple.
Finally, they discussed alternatives that would communicate the agreement in more visual and engaging ways.
Visual representation of terms of service. We mentioned 6-7 pages of text. You're not going to read that. What about a video?
Similarly, for privacy settings, clear language, easy to find and intuitive controls, in addition to a visual representation of what happens to their information after they've made changes, would help the consumers feel more comfortable with their privacy settings and more confident in the relationships with whom they're sharing their personal information. In keeping with the culture of learned helplessness, our participants expressed a lack of knowledge and awareness about what was done with their information.
We need to be educated. Obviously, it took us coming in here to be aware, so we talked about education, awareness, and investment.
Our participants suggested topics for education like how to protect themselves, what their data is being used for, navigating service agreements, and how they might benefit from sharing their personal information.
At a young age, we're taught, don't leave your toys somewhere where they can get stolen. Don't leave. It makes sense to me that, especially with kids using the internet at younger and younger ages, that they can learn what's safe and not safe.
They said if they knew these things, they'd be more engaged with the brands, more willing to share their personal information, and more invested in the process as a whole.
To educate people about what it is about their privacy settings that they're giving out, that might not be wise or not, like awareness that it could be kind of a problem, and then investment, like actually caring that your information is going someplace. Because
for businesses, education and awareness could include awareness of consumers' concerns with privacy, optimal privacy practices, usability and design best practices, and effective marketing strategies that use transparency to foster healthy and mutually beneficial relationships with consumers. Participants believe that both consumers and companies have responsibilities to ensure that the exchange of their data for services is a mutually beneficial relationship. This charge for accountability applies to businesses as well, as it is imperative to consumers that relationships include reliability for both parties in order for them to feel that they're getting a fair shake. They need to know that there will be consequences for companies that abuse the privilege of harvesting their data. This could happen via some other third party or via self-regulation within the industry by trailblazing companies who set the standard of aggressive transparency that the rest of the market would be driven to follow.
if a company were to make that its selling point, like, hey, we're honest with you about like our policies and stuff, and here we're gonna lay it out for you. I mean, you'd think eventually people would warm up to that and then expect the same out of other more established companies.
Although participants were unsure of where this change should originate and who should enforce it, consumers want to see standards and best practices, along with certifications and seals that they can easily find and recognize. Participants called for a continued effort to bring their voices to the table as privacy issues are discussed among industry and government groups.
More focus groups just like this, solutions to these privacy issues is what's happening right now, getting feedback from people.
A number of these solutions already exist in some form or another. Some companies are more upfront about their privacy policies. There are tools like Ghostery and Ad Blocker that consumers can use to be aware of and opt out of tracking and targeting efforts. Privacy seals like WebTrust and Trustee are intended to denote sites that meet certain industry privacy requirements and therefore generate trust between consumers and companies. So we see steps in the right direction. But as we've seen from our research, from a consumer perspective, this system is still highly confusing and deeply complex, leaving consumers to feel impotent and acting in a helpless manner. In most cases, consumers simply aren't aware of the tools available to them and the industry-wide initiatives that are in place. There's clearly much more work to be done as we explore these questions and calls to action, and we will use these findings to inform the design of future projects as we move forward to quantitatively test these emerging hypotheses on a projectable basis.